Vixen. Oh. Hey LBW, how's it going? Good to see you. Huh? Oh no, tell them to leave, LBW. That's too many. Hey Skugget, how's it going? I'm alright. I'm alright. Alright. Might as well get started, right? Let's see. Play this music. Alright. Everyone get comfortable. Okay. So everyone can see this. Good. We're here. That's right. 30 people. That's a lot. LBW. All right. So I suppose today is line bundle day. I don't know where people are in their education. Discord's a little bit of a private thing. But yeah. I can Mega you should DM me. I can get you in there. It's yeah. Yeah. It doesn't have to be very private. But it doesn't have to, it shouldn't be very public either. It should be somehow limited. Okay. So let's talk today about line bundles, their sections, and what the word linear system means. Then I'll review how sections of line bundles provide maps to projective space. Classical topic. Must know. Everyone must be familiar with it, must become comfortable with this. And then there's the connection between divisors, certain nice kind of divisors, and line bundles. That's a classical connection between two seemingly unrelated objects. And then I'll talk just a couple of comments about maps between vector bundles, because those will be used all the time in setting up enumerative problems. Okay? So, familiarity with line bundles is a must for any classical-minded algebraic geometer. It is the fundamental language we use. And, okay, yeah, AC, that'd be good. There's one reason why there are many reasons why line bundles show up, but the one I'm kind of focusing on today is that for most varieties we ever encounter in this class or in classical algebraic geometry, there aren't a whole lot of regular functions. Like if you have a projective variety, then there aren't that many regular functions. In fact, it's just constant functions. All right. I mean, okay. And so if you're trying to, yes, geometrically connected, yes. They're just constants. And so in particular, if you're trying to define subvarieties using functions by setting them equal to 0, you'll have a hard time. You'll get things like all of x or nothing. That's just kind of a tragedy. And so where do line bundles arise? They arise naturally when you're trying to define certain codimension 1 subvarieties, which locally look like they're one function set equal to 0. But of course, globally, there is no function that only partially is 0 on part of the variety and non-zero on other parts for these kinds of varieties with many sides to them, right? The issue is projective varieties fundamentally have many charts, and you have to keep the charts, don't superimpose charts, keep them separate in your minds, and you have to kind of imagine transferring from one chart to the other and juggling. That's just the fundamental reality of the situation. But a line bundle provides a kind of cohesive language for locally defined functions which aren't globally functions, which you can then set equal to 0. And that object is just a section of a line bundle. Thankfully, if we enhance the word function to section of line bundle, this gives us some more flexibility for easily defining, especially codimension 1 subvarieties of X. And this will be suitably nice ones, okay? All right. Okay. So how? It's a very simple thing. It's a very simple thing. All right. So suppose L is a line bundle. And now suppose S is a non-zero section. The non-zero means not the zero section. Okay? It doesn't mean that S is picking out a non-zero vector everywhere on X. Then we use the word everywhere non-zero section. Okay? Suppose S is not the zero section. Then S defines in a natural way a particularly nice type of subscheme of X. Subscheme. That's subscheme. Okay? Subscheme means a sheaf of ideals, i.e. sheaf of ideals. And for those that are still learning the ropes, that means one ideal per affine spec A that's building your X up, affine open, and the ideals agree on overlaps. They are the ideals localized to the same ideal as on when two open sets overlap. Okay? So so you get a sheaf of ideals. Here's how it's defined. Remember that there's some open cover. You can take them to be open affines because the open affines form a basis for the topology. But there's some open covering of X over which there are trivializations of L. Well, the section S, when you restrict only to over that open subset, when you look at it after composing with this isomorphism, B sub alpha, it becomes a section of just the trivial bundle. And since it's a section of the first projection map, this map, the content of this map is captured just by what the output is on the second coordinate. In other words, that's a regular function. Like it's like a point goes to that same point. Just if I work at the level of points, comma, f of p. F alpha of p. The dependency on alpha is something that I'm specifying. In other words, a section trivializes to a regular function on that open set. Only on that open set do you see a function. Remark, only on that open set do you see a function because you have a particular trivialization that you've chosen. This f alpha depends on that. And that's not some natural thing. You can always compose a trivialization with some automorphism of that variety over u alpha. Or, you can, trivializations are not canonical. They're just existence statement. All right, so thanks to trivializations, you get local functions from a given section. But you see, these sections, this one section is globally defined. And so what that means is that these particular functions on two distinct trivialization over open sets, they agree according to the transition functions underlying the line bundle L. But to say it without getting the transition functions backwards, they differ by a unit. When restricted to the common overlap. All right, so now pay attention to the following thing. If these two individual functions restrict up to a unit to the same one, then the ideal that they generate will restrict, the principal ideal will restrict to the same principal ideal on the overlap. Because you're just choosing, the two elements are off by a unit, so you're generating the same ideal. You're not getting the same element in the coordinate ring of the intersection, but you're getting the same ideal. And this is classic closed subscheme sheaf of ideals that you're witnessing, rather than a single ideal, globally defined. Okay? Exactly like a log. They're differing by either that unit or the inverse. I'm going to get it wrong. All right, you can try to trace through exactly how they'll differ. It's probably the same one, but they're differing by either that transition G alpha beta or the inverse, one of the two. Exactly right. Okay? But so the individual elements, little local functions, aren't in agreement on the nose, on the overlaps. No. But the ideal they generate, the principal ideal, is the same of their restrictions. And so therefore, the vanishing scheme of S is well defined. It is, if you'd like, the union of all of these f alphas, f betas set equal to 0 scheme theoretically. So you're just quotienting out by that principal ideal everywhere. Just that ideal. Or holding that ideal, sheaf of ideals. It's the sheaf of ideals Notice that if you take a different trivialization on U alpha cross A1, two trivializations differ by an element in GL1 of OX U alpha. That's what the automorphisms of this A1 over U alpha are. It's just a 1-by-1 invertible matrix, or an invertible element in O of U alpha. And so when you say take this ideal on U alpha, it's well defined. You choose a different trivialization, you're going to get the same ideal, but not the same function, F alpha. You'll get a function up to a unit, which is one particular principal ideal. Okay? And the scheme is that ideal. It's not the individual functions. The schemes are defined by ideal sheaves, not by function sheaves. Okay? Great. Great. And so in this way, you see that a section of a line bundle defines a closed subscheme which is locally defined by a single equation. Is a particularly nice kind of subscheme. What kind of object is a line bundle? Yes, it's a variety if X is a variety. It's a scheme if X is a scheme. It's a topological space if X is a topological space only. It's a complex manifold if X is a complex manifold. It is a real manifold if X is a real manifold. So that's what a line bundle is. It's the No. Sections you can think of as this picture is fine. This is a fine picture. No. I mean, you have to remember, you're not going to be able to imagine most of these things. So, every time you use imagination, it's always a little bit wrong. Sections are in the category of the in the subject you're studying. Exactly. Continuous sections if you're only doing topological spaces in line bundle. Holomorphic sections if that's what your category, what subject you were in. But for us, it's algebraic varieties, and that's good enough. Schemes, it just goes word for word. That's why, if you notice, all of the things were just like appealing to the structure sheaf and what you're doing. Like you have an element in the structure sheaf for that open set. And so that's why everything you say for varieties just extends word for word for schemes. Because in the scheme language, they'll just literally write the same exact symbols, and they'll say just same story. So. Yeah, you can do the equalizer if you already know algebraic geometry. You have to know that you have fiber products. But if you look at what a fiber product is in this case, it's just because you have a sheaf of ideals that defines the scheme structure on it. But yeah, the sheaf of ideals is also better for another reason. And that's because of the connection between line bundles and divisors. Yeah, I wouldn't really think about it. I don't think it's better to think about it as a as an equalizer in some space. Yeah, Yeah. Sheaf of ideals instead of ideals. Yes. Okay. So in this little cartoon picture, you see the vanishing scheme will be something like I don't know. Wherever the dimensions are all off, but you get some vanishing scheme. And it's locally defined by a single equation. So by dimension theory, the codimension of these vanishing schemes should be 1. And unless you're in a very terrible situation, it will be exactly 1. In all of our situations, when you take a non-zero section, you will get a codimension 1 subscheme. All right? All right. Great. So now, if you do the example of O of n on projective space, for example, a section sections of this line bundle O of 2 are defining conics, if you look at their vanishing scheme. And every conic arises as the vanishing scheme of a unique section up to scale. All right? Okay, so that's one comment. If you scale a section by a non-zero, whatever field you're over, complex number, yeah? If you scale a section by a non-zero number, you get the same vanishing scheme. You get the same, I'm just going to start calling it, you get the same divisor, associated divisor. That's because you're just multiplying each of these F alphas by that complex number. So, and that just carries through. You're not changing the ideals. Okay? So, so in this example, if you look at the space of global sections of O of 2, and you mod out by scaling, you get a perfect bijection with the collection of conics in P2. Just by design, yeah? So you get like a bijection between the sort of collection of conics in P2. Where conics are conic schemes. So you got the smooth conics, you got union of two lines, you've got a line counted twice, you know, the square of an equation of a line. You've got all that all together, but the correspondence is up to scaling. And without the zero section. So you remove the zero section of this vector space, mod out by scaling, and you get the totality of all conics. What was it? I failed to see why they are codimension 1. Okay, so codimension 1. So codimension 1. What I'm using here is a little bit of commutative algebra. It says that if you have a ring, and if you take an element, then I suppose maybe you need it to be a local ring. Okay, doesn't matter. But if you have a ring and an element, then when you set that element equal to 0, and you look at the resulting new ring, you know, quotient by that principal ideal, this dimension drops by at most 1. And it drops by 1 when your element is a non-zero divisor. This is called Krull's Hauptsidealsatz. But it's called Krull's principal ideal theorem. All right. When you set one equation equal to 0, your dimension drops by at most 1. Yeah. Okay. This is and this is covered in the chapter 0 in the dimension part, like facts about dimension. In chapter 0, you'll see it. Okay. Now, how does that apply here? Well, look, the subscheme was locally. It's always. Every time someone defines a subscheme of a complicated variety, you will only get local descriptions, ultimately. If you're only wanting to talk about coordinate rings and individual functions. Because there are no functions to hold on to globally. So, this scheme, how is it defined locally inside of your variety X? Well, locally, on particular opens, you set one equation equal to 0. The F alpha on the U alpha chart, you set it equal to 0. One equation. And then you're taking that closed subscheme, corresponding to setting that one element equal to 0. So it's codimension 1, as long as this F alpha is a non-zero divisor inside that coordinate ring for that U alpha. Each U alpha has its separate coordinate ring that you have to juggle. Because these are the many sides of a given projective variety. You have to get used to. Okay? Does that make sense? Why it's codimension 1? What does the 2 in O of 2 stand for? The 2 stands for squaring the transition functions for O of 1. That's right. What is a vanishing scheme? So what we need is what's a closed subscheme? That's okay. You don't have to know what that is to continue with this course. But closed subscheme equals, using our language, because remember a sheaf is a coherent sheaf in our class. So just remember that. Closed subscheme equals sheaf of ideals. Now, what are you supposed to think of? You're supposed to think of a closed subset of the topological space whose structure sheaf is a quotient of of X's structure sheaf. Okay? Right? So, for example, let's do a very simple example. What is the vanishing scheme? Okay, so let's take X is A1. OX is the trivial line, corresponds to the trivial line bundle. Now, since I'm looking at A1, O of X has so many sections, global sections. This is just the coordinate ring of an affine scheme. This is AX. I'll choose a section now. X squared minus X cubed minus X. What is the vanishing scheme of this? it's not just the vanishing set of this equation. Let's make it squared here. X cubed minus x squared. It's not just the vanishing set. It's this. It is in fact just this. Spec of which is a yeah. It's not just the subset. It remembers the multiplicities or the really it's remembering the ideal that gave rise to that particular sub-scheme. Yeah? It's just an ideal. And the reason why we didn't have a weird sheaf of ideals is because this variety has only one side. It's a basic building block. It's a building block open set in P1, which is a variety now that has multiple charts that you have to now hope that your ideal sheaf on one side was consistent with your ideal on the other side. You see? So, so yeah. Does that make sense? Closed sub-scheme is an ideal sheaf of ideals. And the ideals have to make sense. They have to be in agreement when you compare what's assigned on overlaps. All right, good. Great. So line bundles, if you look at a section of a line bundle, you'll get a subvariety by looking at its vanishing scheme, which is particularly nice. It's codimension 1 in non-pathological situations. And it's not just that it's codimension 1, it's locally defined by a single equation. All right? So a subscheme which is codimension 1 and locally defined by a single equation, or a subscheme whose sheaf of ideals is rank 1 locally free, is called a Cartier divisor. It's a especially nice kind of divisor where added emphasis on its defining equation locally is just one non-zero divisor in the coordinate rings. All right? Okay. Oh, this is interesting. We have to do this testing right now. Okay. Good. Yeah. All right. Good. Oh, there's some stuff happening in that chat. Oh, no. Okay. So now, look at this example of O of 2 on projective space. Its global sections corresponded to homogeneous forms in 3 variables. Their vanishing schemes were just your conics that you learn how to use to manipulate in Shafarevich style algebraic geometry. Notice that the space of sections, in a sense, parametrizes a family of divisors on P2. In this example, it's the conics. Okay, so we have some language, very classical language. All right, if you have a line bundle on a variety or a scheme, then a linear system is just a vector space of sections. It's a vector space of global sections. All right, it's just a vector space. For us, it'll always be finite dimensional vector space. Okay? Okay. All right. That's what it is. A two-dimensional vector space of sections is called a pencil. A three-dimensional family vector space of sections it's called a net. And a four-dimensional space is called a web. All right, this is classical language. So what is a pencil of conics, for example? It is a two-dimensional vector space of global sections of O of 2. Which, if you choose a basis, you choose your two favorite ones. It is the following family of conic equations. And if you keep looking at zero sets, zero schemes of these conics, by the way, F and G are, F of XYZ, G of XYZ, homogeneous degree 2. And what matters for the vanishing, if you want to think about it visually, what this is doing is it's producing families of conics, linear families of conics. A pencil of conics, because for each element in P1, you get a conic by setting this homogeneous form equal to 0. That subscheme. Okay? So a pencil of conics is interpolating between one conic equation and another conics equation. The equations are not functions on P2, folks. They're not well defined. A homogeneous degree 2 thing is not a well-defined function on P2. That's why you use a different target space line bundle, and it's now a section of that line bundle. It's the vanishing of two sections of O of 2. That's what F and G are, two separate sections of O of 2. Then you kind of linearly interpolate through them, and you get a family of conics, and you can see movies of them as you vary S and T in P1. This P1 is the projectivization of that two-dimensional vector space. And similarly, if you have a P2 worth of conics or a three-dimensional vector space of conics, you get a corresponding net of conics. It's a larger dimensional family of conics. Just language. From a line bundle and a vector space of sections, you get a big family of divisors on X, and they move around because you're changing the section according to this vector space, swimming around in this vector space. Okay? So this is a P1 worth of divisors, but it's kind of a linear P1. And this is a P2 worth of divisors on X by taking vanishing schemes. And this is a P3 worth. But in general, we just say, take a linear system of divisors on X. So implicit there is a particular line bundle, and you're just varying sections in vector spaces of sections. All right, just big linear chunks of sections, and you're now varying, and as you vary the sections, this is the section right now, then it's varying in the vector space. You're going to get a different vanishing set, continuously kind of deforming on the variety X. That's the mental picture. All right, so this is very classical imagery. Okay, so that's language. Next, if you have sections of a line bundle, no. A divisor, the definition of a divisor is just a codimension 1 subvariety. Correct. But these divisors, not every divisor, it turns out, will locally be expressible as the vanishing of a single equation. Vanishing scheme. And the classic example of that is actually one of the lines through the origin in a quadric cone. It's a very tricky situation. You can't define that, just that line, that subscheme, that prime ideal is not locally principal, even if you localize at the origin. It's not, you cannot locally generate it, that prime ideal, by a single equation. So a divisor is a more general notion, but the things you get by setting a vanishing, a line bundles section equal to 0, line bundle, one function equal to 0, is a particularly nice kind of divisor, a Cartier divisor. Okay? So that's the thing. That's the adjective Cartier, locally defined by one equation. The best, most simple-minded way of creating a divisor. Locally defined by one equation. So a single ruling line on a quadric cone is not a Cartier divisor. That's a bit of a sad situation, but it's still considered a divisor because it's codimension 1 subvariety. Good question. Okay, so line bundles and sections of line bundles naturally produce maps to projective space. So this is the point. One thing to learn: sections of line bundles can provide maps to projective space. So here's what you need, though. Suppose you're in a situation suppose you have n plus 1 sections. Global sections of a line bundle. N plus 1. Yeah, but a line in P2 is Cartier. Yes. In fact, on any smooth scheme, smooth variety for us, all divisors will be Cartier, luckily. That's relief. Yeah. Okay. So suppose these are n plus 1 elements in you have global sections, this many. And here's one thing. We need to assume something. And also suppose, and also pretend, very crucially, that there is no point on X on your variety X where all of the sections were outputting the 0 vector. I denote the line bundle's fiber over the point X with L sub X. All right, so it's the fiber of the line bundle over the point X. That line. In that one-dimensional vector space, the sections had outputted n plus 1 vectors. Let's pretend that there's no place on X where all of them agreed to be 0. Okay? Absolutely. So then this actually defines, this tuple of sections defines a map from X to projective space. In the following way. Now this doesn't make any sense really. At first it doesn't make sense. You send X to this tuple. Now this doesn't make much sense if you already know what's going on. Because I want to make a comment. S naught of X is not a number. However, the scalar that makes S naught of X and S1 of X differ, the scalar multiple that takes one of those vectors to the other, or vice versa if one of them's 0, that's a number. The ratio or Sj right here are numbers as long as the bottom one isn't 0. All I'm saying is that if someone just says they have a one-dimensional vector space, and then they say, I have a vector in it, it makes no sense to say, oh, is it 5? No. They didn't say that their one-dimensional vector space was the number line and 1, 2, 3, 4. No, it's just some abstract one-dimensional vector space. They didn't choose a basis. Once they choose a basis, then is it 5? Makes sense. Is it 5 times that basis vector? Is it 3 times the basis vector? But the whole point of line bundles is that the vector spaces are not trivialized to being one particular vector space on every fiber. That's what a trivialization does if you think about it. It makes all the fibers, irons them out, and makes them equal to 1A1. That's what phi sub alpha did for you. But you can't trivialize over all of X. And so, this formula doesn't make much sense if you think of it as first outputting n plus 1 numbers and then projectivizing the result. No, what we're saying is that this is a well-defined point regardless of the trivialization you chose around the point X. So that's one way of saying that this is well-defined. You can trivialize and transfer everything on U alpha into actual functions, f sub 0, f sub 1. But then you have to ask, what if someone trivialized another way? No problem. This tuple as a point in projective space won't change. They'll all scale by the same fixed constant. Okay? So that's a subtle point, but very important. That a map, sections of a line bundle, if they don't have simultaneous vanishing at any point, produce maps to projective space. Right, so, in other words, if you equate this with just the sort of span, right? If you equate the choosing a tuple of sections with, like, take the span of those sections, you get a vector space in h naught of x sub l with the chosen basis. That's a linear system. So I'm just going to summarize it as linear systems give you maps to projective, encode maps to projective spaces. As long as they are what's called base point free. Base point free linear systems actually give you a map. That's this condition, that there's no point x where all the elements were vanishing. All the sections were vanishing at that point is called a base point of a linear system. What makes a linear system complete? There's a name for this particular linear system. This W, where you take the collection of all sections, a basis of all sections of this line bundle, this is called a complete linear system or series. Take them all. It's the full linear system of sections of L. No, X didn't have to be projective or anything. X can just be an abstract scheme. Yeah. Absolutely. You just have to have the property that there are no points on X for which all of the sections are vanishing. That causes the output 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and then projective space doesn't know what to do with that. That's not picking out a particular direction through the origin, so to speak. All right, so that's another way that you'll often see a line bundle with sections of it emerge. They're trying to map your abstract X to projective space. And they're saying a very good way of doing that is to choose a line bundle. Hopefully the line bundle is what's called base point free, meaning there are sections, enough of them, which don't simultaneously vanish at some point on your variety. Then you'll get a well-defined map to projective space. All right. So that's more language, tying in the concept of a linear system with a map to a projective space. And now I'll draw a picture. Suppose you have a line bundle with a base point free linear system on it. Then you get the following thing. You get this map. Phi sub W. Maybe not phi. We'll call it this thing, capital Phi from X. This induces the map that I wrote before. Okay, so it's got it's a regular map. It's actually a regular map from X to Pn. Okay. Now, if you now take on Pn the linear system of hyperplanes corresponding to sections of O of 1, right? The linear system of hyperplanes, degree 1 homogeneous forms. Linear system. So I'm imagining the various divisors that I get by setting different forms equal to 0, changing the section around. Okay, there's like n plus 1 of them that are kind of distinguished. these particular coordinate hyperplanes? And if I like start really moving them around, you can get all kinds of crazy ones. You can get this general one, for example. That's the general one. Diagonal. Whatever. Yeah? Then the way this map is defined, like if you wrote it out in charts and so on, the way this map is defined is that if you look at the scheme theoretic preimage of this hyperplane, you get the vanishing scheme of S0. According to vanishing scheme from the beginning of lecture, of just a section. And if you were to look at just any one of them, you get the vanishing scheme, not just like set. It's clear from the point-wise description of this map that you get the same set, but it's actually very, very simple compatibility. And if you take the preimage of that particular hyperplane, you get the vanishing scheme of that corresponding combination of the sections. And so my point is, if someone gives you a map to projective space that was read off from a linear system, then by taking preimage of hyperplanes in projective space and looking at what the stuff you get on X, you get the same movie as the linear system of divisors moving around on X, which were created by this vector space of sections. The same system of divisors is interpreted now as preimages of hyperplanes under this map. No. We're not saying that. This is a basis. This is not. This doesn't have to be complete. Doesn't have to be complete. Okay, so the relationship between so my point is, it's often classical-minded people will often switch between ways of thinking about a map to projective space. Sometimes they'll choose to focus on it's an input-output map, like X goes to this tuple. But sometimes they'll choose to think not about the map, but the collection of divisors on X, which are obtained by taking preimage of hyperplanes in Pn. But what is that collection of divisors? It is simply a linear system of divisors. Namely, there's a line bundle and there's a vector space of sections that you're varying. And for each of those sections, you're taking vanishing scheme. And in this way, you get a family of divisors moving around on X. It's a visual way of thinking about, it's a movie that emerges when you have a map to projective space or a vector space of sections of a line bundle. Okay, so now it's 7. And what I was supposed to do was also talk about the relationship between divisors and line bundles. So now I'll do that really, really fast because we've had enough exposure for you to be able to piece this connection together in the off time when you're all working hard trying to understand line bundles because it's not a spectator sport. Ready? I'm now going to make a connection between divisors and line bundles. Actually, I've already shown you one direction of this connection, vague connection. That if you have a line bundle, and if you had a section of it, it'll produce for you a divisor, a codimension 1 subscheme, whose ideal sheaf is locally free, generated by one non-zero divisor. Okay, you get that direction. But what if someone gave you a codimension 1 subscheme whose ideal sheaf is locally generated by one element? Just watch the video again. I'm going to go the more interesting direction. Suppose we have a Cartier divisor. I'll show you that there's a line bundle floating around, and it's going to feel very stupid. This means a codimension 1 subscheme whose sheaf of ideals is rank 1 locally free. Let me say that in a very simple way. There exists an open cover of X for which the ideals are principal ideals. The ideals defining X, the ideals defining D on that particular open are principal ideals generated by a non-zero divisor. Non-zero divisor. I'll call it F sub alpha. Okay? Then I claim that there's a line bundle floating around in the picture. Namely, line bundles were rank 1 locally free sheaves by their sheaves of sections. So there's this line bundle that corresponds to this data right here. If you want the transition functions, just ask what are the transition functions between F alpha and F beta on an overlap. The defining local equations of D. All right? That's your transition data, G alpha beta. And there's a line bundle here. The one that's sort of corresponding to this ideal sheaf. And we have a name for this particular line bundle. The ideal sheaf of a divisor. It's written OX of minus D. The minus sign is for a reason. And on Wednesday, I'll start with the example of OP1 minus a point. The ideal sheaf of a point, single point, reduced point on P1. And then you'll see why it's a minus sign, because the signs for other things match up. This is the ideal sheaf. Line bundle corresponding almost by definition to a Cartier divisor. A subscheme locally defined by a single non-zero divisor equation equal to 0. You kind of pit the local defining equations against each other on overlaps, and you get your transition functions. All right, and that particular line bundle is called the ideal sheaf of, it's called OX of minus D, and it's written like this. Okay, so that's how you get from a divisor-like thing to a line bundle-like thing. You just kind of read off the transition functions on defining equations, so to speak. I'll do this example in to start on Wednesday, but then we need to move on. This is we can't get lost in just this kind of line bundly stuff, because a lot of it has to be done in the safety and privacy of your own rooms. Okay, great. So you got to unpack what I just laid out here between now and Wednesday, and try to go through the argumentation, the way that you get a closed subscheme from a section locally on patches. Run through that yourselves. I think I'll delay this conversation for a bit. When it shows up, we'll talk about it. So we can delay for just a bit, because I really do want to start chapter 1, and I don't want this to be a course on scheme theory, because it's not needed completely. You don't need all assumptions on Noetherianity and etc. To appreciate. It's clear that you don't, in some sense, some essential aspect of this whole story cannot possibly depend on having to understand every exercise in Hartshorn. Why? Because of this fellow right here. At some point, you got to dive in, and then let the you got to sort of bulk up on abstract nonsense. I mean, look at that date. You think he was just like stuck in the weeds pondering what a sheaf was? I mean, it's important to do that, but no, you won't. You're not going to get no 5.8 trillion by sitting around talking about, oh, is it a push out? Is it you take the, what was it, equalizer of the series? Please, let's get to some real stuff. Chapter 1, that's what we're getting. Chapter 1. So next time, chapter 1. But members of the Discord, you are encouraged to talk about line bundles, sections, how to think about them. What is O of 2 on projective space? What are its transition functions? What's the ideal sheaf of 3 points on P1? These 3 points. Can I zoom in and see what it is in examples? You still have to do that, and I can't do that for you. So yeah, you guys should talk about that as much as you can in the Discord. There's a lot to lift, a lot of personal weightlifting that needs to be done. Yeah, megalomorph. No, what the problem is, what happened with algebraic geometry is, for grad students, they think, at least when I was a grad student, there was some kind of rumor out there that, yo, if you want to do algebraic geometry, sit down and go page by page through Hartshorn. Now, there is some value to doing this, and yes, I had to do that. I did do that. However, I'm quite convinced that the actual concrete algebraic geometry that I learned, I didn't learn it because of that. It's a completely different ballgame. The intuitions you get by juggling linear systems around and asking what you're supposed to do with them, the fluency with vector bundles and line bundles, didn't come from me pondering what is sheafification. It just didn't. And it didn't for the classical the people before, right? Zariski was born in the Italian school. They knew some stuff. How did they know it? Must have been some other path. Hi, are you related to Raj Patel? Yes. Yes. That's my brother. Corpus. Yeah. Okay. So, chapter 1, let's dive in as fast as we can. And that means read through chapter 0, the rest of it. Chapter 0 still has a section called Basics on Dimension Theory. Or something like that. The last part of chapter 0. Just at least understand the statements of what's being said to the best you can. And then when they show up in earnest, we'll deal with it in chapter 1. Yeah, homework is become fluent with line bundles. Absolutely. Make it so you're not scared of them. Master the transition functions on P1 at least, very least. And notice that it's O of n has global sections, homogeneous polynomials of degree n. And that's a linear system on P1. Maybe do P2 if you're brave. And then that's good enough. Yeah. All right. Good. So chapter 1 will be actual examples, and there's the keynote problems. We're gonna try to understand them, what they're saying, so on and so forth, and then just go through 3264 and talk about what they're saying. So that should be fun. All right, so that's Wednesday. Any questions about anything right now that you want me to talk about right now? Just let me know. Any burning questions? Any gripes? You could think of this as graduate student gripe session too, because a lot of you are graduate students, and you can just ask, especially if you're trying to go into algebraic geometry, you can ask like, there are thousands of written sources for line bundles. I don't even know. For me, I don't know why, but I don't know. Some people had bad experience with this, but I really loved the exposition in Mumford's Red Book. I just remember that being like it suddenly hit, maybe. But maybe it was like after I read 100 other expositions, this one finally, the osmosis finally sort of finished right when I was reading Mumford's Red Book. There's that. There's got to be one in the geometry of schemes, I would assume. Maybe? There's, of course, Hartshorne, which is sort of recommended, but it's not the only source at all. Yeah. Yeah, math online problem solving. Yes, that's true. They don't. Yeah, their questions are a little bit different. It's a whole different ball game. Real algebraic geometry. So no, it's in there. It'll be in there. AC. You'll see U alphas, U's and V's and transition functions. You'll see them somewhere in there. Or maybe it's, yeah. I think Mumford also has another book on algebraic geometry, a more recent one, like varieties and projective space or something. I forget. Or maybe algebraic geometry 2? Could be algebraic geometry 2. Yeah, it could be. I don't know. It could be algebraic geometry 2. But that didn't exist. Right. Okay, yeah. I don't remember now. I thought there was. How can I see this PDF? Can't seem to see it. Is there Yeah, I can't seem to see it, but I just remember it from there for some reason. Yeah. Anyway, I can't see the link, unfortunately. Math online problem solving. All right, but let's make sure that the people that need the credit are here. Who's here? Credits, you know. There's people here, they're waiting for their name to be on the screen. On international TV, there's Australians watching. It's the Australia Central US Algebraic Geometry Intersection Theory Hybrid Course Seminar. So where are the Aussies? Especially LBW, like before. Okay. Awesome. Who else? AC is here. Okay. Who else is here? Like a log. Mops. Welcome. Roosta shows up at the end. Classic. All right. Who else is here, huh? Corpus. Welcome. You're new here. Megalomorph. Hey, did you all know that Megalomorph streams math? That's right. Go check out Megalomorph. One a.m. Arbitrary is here. Arbitrary is still here though. What a trooper. Who else is here? Who's this? Crow. Crow is here. Right, Crow is here. Hope school is going. Oh, you're in your real class. Okay. Okay. Well, you know, BPS was here, making sure everything worked properly. Running some important tests and stuff. Probably because you have to be online to run those things. Vixen was here. Vixen. Oh, exams. Skugget was here. All these people get credit. And apparently, LBW, is it right? There's 30 Aussies? That can't be true. Why Luo? Yes, geometrically connected. Though we're over an algebraically closed field of characteristic 0 for the rest of this class, so we'll be fine. We'll be fine. Don't worry. It was someone, it was a comment made earlier. A clarification. You had to be there, Arbitrary. You had to be there. Okay. Well. Man, it's raining like crazy here. Tractrix, welcome to the Discord. Tractrix. A good name. That's a good curve. All right. Oh, okay, okay. I kind of suspected. Wait, Crow? But you're nowhere close to us. You're like not close to us. Yeah, it's pretty rainy out here. But yeah, folks. All these great people. Oh, you're in Pennsylvania. I see. Cool. All right, so between now and Wednesday, become more and more comfortable with line bundles, how to think about sections as producing local little defining equations locally. And see if you can do an example or two of analyzing a specific line bundle on a specific variety. If you haven't done the projective space one, you get on that one. All right, O of n on projective space. All right. And talk to each other on the Discord about those kinds of things. Okay? All right. So who's out there? Is Tayo streaming? No. Only Sunday. Okay. Wait, is Megalomorph streaming? No. Okay. Do you know who's a sub here? Hikaru. Hikaru is a sub. Someone gifted a sub to Hikaru. So we're gonna go raid Hikaru, who's only got 17,000 viewers. All right. No. We're gonna support our subs. We're gonna support our subscribers, Crow. Here we go. Here we go. Hey, OpenSet, how's it going? We're gonna go raid one of our subscribers here to support them.